The fog was thicker than Sarah had ever seen. It clung to her as she trudged along the uneven path, her boots sinking into the spongy ground with every step. The sound of her breathing echoed in her ears, unnaturally loud against the eerie silence of the Irish bog. She clutched her camera tightly, its strap digging into her shoulder, a tether to her purpose for being here. The locals had warned her. "Stay out of the bog at night," the old woman at the pub had said, her voice hushed. "There's things that don't belong to this world out there." Sarah had laughed it off. Superstitions, she thought. Stories to keep children from wandering into dangerous terrain. She'd come to the village to photograph the bog's stark beauty for her upcoming exhibition, and she wasn't about to let some ghost story stop her. But now, standing in the middle of the mist-shrouded expanse, she couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't alone. The bog stretched endlessly in every direction, a patchwork of dark pools and tufts of heather. Her headlamp barely pierced the fog, its beam swallowed almost immediately by the dense, soupy air. She checked her phone. No signal, of course. The last bit of advice from the locals floated back to her. "If you hear him, it's already too late." She'd laughed then. She wasn't laughing now. It started as a faint sound, almost indistinguishable from the rustle of the wind. A low, wet squelching, like something heavy being dragged through the mud. She froze, her breath hitching in her throat. Slowly she turned, her headlamp sweeping across the bog. Nothing. Her heart hammered as she forced herself to keep walking. She blamed her nerves, the stories she'd foolishly let get under her skin. But the sound followed her, growing louder. A chill crept up her spine as she realized it wasn't the wind or her imagination. Something was moving out there, just beyond the edge of her vision. Then she saw it. At first it was just a shape in the mist, hunched and still. She lifted her camera instinctively, snapping a photo. The flash illuminated the figure for a split second. A man, or what had once been a man. His skin was dark and leathery, his clothes little more than ragged strips clinging to his frame. His face was a hollow ruin, his eyes milky white, but they seemed to fix on her with unsettling clarity. Sarah staggered back, her foot slipping on the wet ground. She fell hard, the camera skittering from her grasp. Pain shot through her ankle as she scrambled to her feet, her eyes never leaving the figure. It hadn't moved, but the fog seemed to thicken around it, swallowing it whole. She fumbled for her camera, her fingers trembling. When she looked up again, he was closer. The stories came flooding back. The peat keeper, they called him. A man sacrificed centuries ago to appease the gods, his body preserved in the acidic peat. He was said to guard the bog, punishing those who disturbed its sanctity. Sarah didn't believe in gods or curses, but as the figure took a shuddering step toward her, the squelch of his feet deafening in the stillness, she found herself praying. She turned and ran, her injured ankle screaming in protest. The ground sucked at her boots, threatening to pull her under with every step. The squelching grew louder, closer. She didn't dare look back. Her headlamp caught something up ahead, a wooden walkway, ancient and weathered, stretching across the bog. She sprinted toward it, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She reached the planks and scrambled onto them, the solid footing a relief. But the sound didn't stop. The peat keeper stepped onto the walkway behind her, his movements slow but deliberate. Sarah turned to face him, backing away as she fumbled with her camera. If she could just get a clearer shot, maybe someone would believe her. Maybe someone would know what to do. The flash went off, and for a moment, the world was illuminated. The peat keeper's face was inches from hers, his breath a cold, fetid gust that turned her stomach. His hand, dark and withered, reached for her. The planks beneath her gave way. She screamed as she plunged into the freezing water, the bog closing over her like a coffin. She thrashed, clawing at the mud, but it was no use. The peat keeper loomed above her, his milky eyes unblinking, as the water dragged her down. When Sarah's body was found days later, perfectly preserved in the peat, the locals shook their heads and muttered about city folk who didn't listen. Her camera was never recovered, but they say that on foggy nights you can hear the click of a shutter, followed by the squelch of footsteps, a warning to stay away. Because the peat keeper isn't just guarding the bog, he's waiting for someone else to take his place.